again. Happy to see you all. Okay, wait just a second. As I told you before, the topics that I've addressed in this course have focused in large measure on those related to disease management and MD, and I see patients, and today, this is actually the last topic I'll be presenting to you, fittingly. It's sort of the things that happen toward the end of life, related to aging and specifically effects on muscle function. And I hope I'll convince you during the next few minutes. But can you hear me in the back? I just want to make sure Zach can hear me pretty well. This is really something that you should be aware of, both because it's an important condition, and the condition which I'll describe for you is called sarcopenia, muscle wasting, aging. It's a huge public health problem for which the science is still evolving, but it has a lot to do with the metabolic systems we've been discussing as it relates to muscle biology. And it's also something you ought to be thinking about, even though I don't see anybody here that looks like they're at serious risk for the conditions that I'll be describing here. You probably have had grandparents or know people that in this age group in whom this condition is obvious and debilitating. So what is sarcopenia? It's a syndrome characterized by progressive and generalized loss of skeletal muscle mass and strength. And it's obviously important because strength and stability are important for maintaining physical activity and also the ability to prevent things like falls, which are a very serious cause of morbidity and mortality in the aged. So even though none of you have to worry about this right now, what I'll also try to convince you of is that the processes that lead to sarcopenia do start much earlier. And you all ought to be thinking about that in your own lives as well as your interest in biology. So this is the time course that has been described for changes in muscle mass with aging. This is one. So this is one study that aggregated a lot of data across different studies, and it's pretty consistent with other data as well. That in youth, younger than most of you, you're increasing muscle mass as one grows and matures. Then one stabilizes into the 20s and 30s, but beginning as early as the 30s, there begins to be a slow decline in muscle mass that accelerates with age. So this is the phenomenon that we'll be discussing today. It's a universal phenomenon. It's almost a definition of aging. We see individuals like I actually work at Corey. I don't know how many of you have been there. We share our lab space with a senior center in Oakland. So my laboratory is just adjacent to the senior center. You walk in the same door, and seeing individuals like this as I do every day, is a sobering thing to think about, particularly as some of us, like me, are getting into an age group which we have to be aware of that. And you can see how serious that is in later life. But we need to think about what we can do early in life to understand the biology better and to see how we may reduce this process and perhaps stem some of the consequences of aging. And it is related, as I'll show you, to some extent to proper nutrition as well as physical activity. So let's dive into the biology a little bit. This has to do with skeletal muscle. I don't know how many of you have had histology or anatomy, but let me just remind you of the structure of skeletal muscle. It consists of fibers, and those fibers are aggregates of groups of cells and and they're called myofibrils, and each of those myofibrils contains cells that have actin-myosin filaments, and the cells are shown here. They sort of line up across these myofibrils in bands, which are called striations. But the important thing to take away from this is that there's a fiber that has bulk in it, the size of the myofibrils, the amount of actin and myosin, but also the number of cells. So those are the two parameters that govern muscle strength, the size and the number of these fibrils and the cells within them. So again, sarcopenia, sarco is another word for musclepenia, is less of, this is decline in muscle mass, age, we said that. And this is an illustration using a cross-sectional image, a scan across the thigh muscles of a healthy 21-year-old woman with a normal body weight, and this is the muscle mass, and around it is the subcutaneous fat. Here's the femur, things the tibia and fibula, actually. But this is really illustrative of healthy muscles. And here's, again, unfortunately, a pretty typical older woman with the same body mass, which is not fat, it's not thin. There's a big change in the distribution of tissues in the cell, in the leg. There's a lot more fat and a lot less muscle. So that is what happens. Now, you need to understand, to really get a feel for what's going on with aging, you need to understand the biology of muscle, also in terms of the heterogeneity of muscle types and muscle fibers. This is something that plays a lot into not just this condition, study of muscle biology, but it's really related in a lot of ways to intermediate metabolism as well, because these different fibers, as we'll discuss, have different metabolically used, different substrates that are used for energy and power generation, and as a result, they have differing capabilities of generating prolonged aerobic activity or shorter anaerobic activity. So let's look to see what these are. And there are several types here. Just focus for the moment on the type 1, and the type 2 has several subtypes. But we'll compare the type 1 and the type 2B just as the extremes. So type 1, which in many people is the major form of fiber, particularly in young people, as I'll show you. This is a slowly contracting muscle, high resistance to fatigue. It's used for aerobic activity, long distance running, bicycling, etc. So this is the thing you count on out there for hours. You have the time to do that. Low power, but a lot of endurance. And these muscles have a lot of mitochondria. Mitochondria give meat in our muscles a color. So these are red muscles because they're full of mitochondria. And it's like what happens with red meat, it's full of mitochondria. Beef. The capillary density is high, so there's a lot of blood coming through it. There's a lot of oxidative capacity, which is what keeps things going during aerobic exercise, the oxygen. And here's something you should also know, because this relates to our metabolic discussions. Fat, the major storage fuel in muscles in type 1 fibers is triglyceride. So even though there's a kind of a paradox, very active people who have a lot of endurance exercise capability don't have a lot of fat in their muscle. Nevertheless, they have a high turnover of triglycerides. Triglycerides are stored and metabolized as the major fuel source for sustained activity. And in conjunction with this, they consume lactic acid as a part of their metabolic function. So let's compare that with type 2, the type 2 fiber, extreme type 2B. So it's almost like the flip side. These are fast contraction type muscles. They're called fast twitch is another word for them. They tend to not be very resistant to fatigue. That is, the longer you use them, the more they kind of wear out. So they're used for short-term activity, anaerobic, less oxygen. And these types of muscle, type 2 fibers, differ mainly in their ability to maintain activity over short periods of time. So these are really the fast switches to 2B, and then you sort of get a little slower. You go to the 2X and 2A, but the basic idea is that compared to type 1, they are much shorter. They allow you to maintain exercise for much shorter periods of time, but with lots of power. They have low mitochondrial density, low capillary density, less oxygen through the capillaries. And so their major fuel source is not fat, but ATP and creatine phosphate. So this is where Krebs cycle and all the things we've been talking about, mitochondrial energy generation, come into play with regards to ATP generation and use. And also muscles take creatine, which is synthesized actually in the liver, is transported to muscle. It's phosphorylated, so creatine phosphate is the metabolic fuel for these muscles. And so they consume creatine phosphate. Just mentioned briefly, one of the ones in between, type 2A as opposed to type 2B. It's just part of the spectrum, but interestingly, it actually produces lactic acid and also does synthesize more creatine phosphate. You really don't have to know that level of detail. Just keep in mind that these two types, type 1 and type 2, differ in ways we just described. So with aging, what happens to these fibers? So here again is a muscle fiber. This time it's a micrograph. And there's two types of muscle fibers in here. I don't know whether they're obvious to you in the picture, but I can show you that the decrease in muscle fiber size and the number of muscle fibers themselves is due to a selective loss with age of the type 2 fibers. So almost more than half type 2 fibers are lost by the age of 85. And so, if you haven't picked it up already, here's the type 1 in an older individual. Here are the reduced numbers and also the reduced size of the type 2 fibers. They're more collapsed. They're sicker. And so this is the devil. How can you prevent that? Type 1 seems to survive better with age than type 2. So you'd be thinking about the biology here in terms of those types of muscle fibers, and think about the consequences of the loss of type 2 fibers with aging. So what happens with the loss of type 2 fibers to the ability to engage in physical activity? Which of these forms is it affect, anaerobic or aerobic? Think about the answer to that question. I'll have to shout it out at once. The answer is it's less anaerobic activity, because that's really what they sustain duration of activity. Again, you're going to lose the short-term bursts of high-power activity. That's what happens functionally with aging, and the switching fuel from using triglyceride primarily less creatine phosphate. So again, how do you prevent the loss of muscle growth with aging? You should be thinking about that even early in life. As you get a little older, it'll be more relevant to you personally as well. So there's nutrition, which we'll talk about a bit later, but it's also it's sort of obvious, I guess, that physical activity should help to prevent the loss of muscle function, because with physical activity, you generally can increase muscle size and muscle strength. However, master athletes in this study who have run marathons or longer into their 90s, etc., still have age-related muscle loss. And even those that start off with higher fiber areas when they're younger. And this, the protective effect of exercise, there is this protective effect in younger years, it slows down. And so as one goes from 20 to 80, there is a significant decline in muscle performance, 40% endurance running, 60% weightlifters. So it also affects short-term high-power muscles, and as well as the type 1 muscles that involve endurance, but the effect is greater on the high-power performance that is a function of the type 2 fibers. And how many of you follow sports and stuff do? With athletes, the NBA players, for example, when they reach the age of 35, you start hearing about these old guys, and they can't perform the spring in their step, power. These are people that are really fit. So this is an example at a high level of what happens even in very well-trained individuals. And older sprinters who rely on type 2 fibers still have a reduction in type 2, so they lose that sprint high-power push. And so the conclusion is that regular physical activity can help slow or even prevent the age-related decline in muscle mass. What it does, and I think I have an example of this later, it causes hypertrophy of the type 1 fibers. The type 1 fibers are relatively resistant to aging, but it doesn't really do much for the type 2. So the muscle may look as big as it was in youth, but there's a shift from a mix of type 1 and type 2 fibers, and mostly type 1 have loss of type 2. And exercise does not prevent that loss of type 2. So this is, I'll show you some data, actually, just to provide an illustration of that. Studies that have been done to show that with immobilization, so this is something if you happen to be immobilized, in this case, from a cast, and if you're a younger individual, you can see that this is a measure of muscle function and muscle mass. It goes down significantly after only 2 weeks of immobilization, and it's more in younger than older individuals. So young people are more sensitive to immobilization. But with retraining, you bounce right back, whereas the older individuals may lose what they start with, but they don't get back to where they started. And the second study really shows the same thing in younger individuals, in this case, following 4 days of limb immobilization. You can see the differences here are very small, pre-immobilization, after immobilization, and after recovery. They're pretty stable. The older individuals start off a bit lower, they lose a bit more, and with recovery, they don't get back to where they were at baseline. So it's a one-way street, if you will, that exercise cannot totally deal with, particularly the type 2 fibers. So what are the causes of sarcopenia? Well, there's a lot of candidates, culprits, that are probably all contributed in various ways, including those that contribute to the effects of aging. There's changes in hormone status, endocrine status. Insulin resistance here is the one that's the most important. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Loss of motor neurons, which innervate the muscle fibers and cause them to contract, can degenerate, and this is a function of aging itself. So motor neuron loss can lead to less stimulation of muscle, and hence less durability of the muscle. Nutrition is important, either through diet or malabsorption, disease states. There are sort of primary age-related effects, which is a bit vague, since we don't know all the things that occur with age, but changes in hormones, which relate to the endocrine system, cell death, apoptosis, And we will talk about mitochondrial dysfunction, which crosses over, as you know in our hearing, and of course, a lot of diseases, including sarcopenia. This use, we just showed you how the mobility can affect muscle strength. And cachexia, which again is kind of the flip side of nutrition, people that are losing muscle mass because of chronic illness may not be able to maintain adequate nutrition status. So overall, the big picture is that muscle mass, muscle cell number and size, fibers result from a balance of anabolism, growth, and catabolism of muscle. So it's constantly going up and down in terms of the conditions that muscle faces in life that help to cells to proliferate, grow, and counteract the effects of breakdown with this use. So insulin and amino acids are anabolic. Exercise can promote anabolism. Some nutrients we'll talk about in a moment. So that's a positive effect on protein synthesis, muscle mass strength function. Negative side, catabolic or anti-anabolic effects, sedentary living, mobilization, we just talked about. So nutrition. Protein is what muscles use to increase their mass. So simple inadequate protein intake, such as occurs with aging, people that don't eat as well, use some of their senses, smell and taste, and food intake can go down. Protein intake is really critical for normal muscle function. There are conditions that reduce the ability to use the available protein. That's where insulin resistance comes into play. Immobility is a factor. So the same amount of protein has less of a functional effect on muscle tissue. And then there's conditions that require greater protein intake. That's chronic inflammation, arthritis, things like that, in which there is an inflammatory process that causes greater protein breakdown, and also can affect protein structure through oxidative modification and generating free radicals. So in general, protein intake should be maintained, and we'll talk about how much that should involve. But what's shown here is some evidence that the distribution of protein during the day is important. A lot of people have the protein intake pattern on the right, where breakfast is rather low, it goes up most of dinner. That's not optimal. The optimal is, it's been shown to be a distribution for a total of about 90 grams of protein overall from meals, which most people don't do. So we're really facing already a disadvantage for many people in their normal dietary practice. So protein obviously supplies amino acids, and among those amino acids, the one that's really most important, we think metabolically, for maintaining normal muscle structure and function is leucine. We've heard about leucine. I'm not sure you're aware, there's lots of studies of leucine, effects of insulin sensitivity, etc. It is an insulin secretagogue, and it affects both the initiation of translation of muscle proteins in the cells and subsequent synthesis of the muscle protein itself. So it's the amino acid stimulating translation and synthesis of muscle protein that's at stake here. How does it work? It activates mTOR, which is so prevalent in all nutrition-related conditions. It's a nutritional sensor, nutrient sensor. It's also an energy sensing signaling pathway. And so it activates that in a positive way. Increased insulin availability through the secretory effects of leucine. So leucine increasing insulin secretion, that itself increases protein synthesis directly, and it does so through phosphorylation of AKT, PKB, which is you probably know by now, it's a generalized regulator of mTOR through insulin action. Leucine, on the other hand, promotes the phosphorylation of the downstream effectors of mTOR, shown here. It's called 41. These are downstream mTOR. So insulin acts upstream to increase mTOR expression, and then leucine acts downstream of mTOR. So the two together complement each other in their effects on muscle function and structure. And with increasing age, here we come back to the sarcopenia issue, muscle may become resistant both to the insulin resistance, which is not mentioned here, but also to the effects of leucine, stimulatory effects of leucine. And so supplemental leucine has been studied as a means of trying to counteract muscle atrophy, to see if we can improve protein synthesis in aging muscle with mixed results. There are other nutritional metabolic factors to consider. Insulin can prevent muscle protein breakdown, so reduced insulin sensitivity can result in increased muscle catabolism. Muscle is starting to age. This loss of muscle tissue can be accompanied by infiltration with fat in connective tissue. That's the picture I showed you early on, where there's all the fat is fat not just around the muscle, but in the muscle. It's called myosteatosis. And that can further impair muscle function, particularly in obesity. And obviously here again, weight loss and physical activity can be beneficial in improving insulin sensitivity, reducing muscle fat. So what are the causal mechanisms? So here we get into a little bit of a black box, although there are some mechanisms that we should be aware of. As we just discussed, this is really a condition that goes hand in hand with aging, and aging itself is not well understood. So you get a better idea of what causes aging, we'll probably be able to understand more about sarcopenia. But there are some reasonably plausible hypotheses that explain both, could explain both the loss of muscle cell number due to cell death, as well as reduction in muscle fiber size. So these two parameters together, which influence the total amount of muscle and its function, the number of muscle cells in the fibrils, and then the fiber size itself. Reduced cell number can be due to reduced neuronal stimulation. You mentioned that the triggering of muscle activity by the neurons is an important activator of muscle activity that can stimulate many metabolic processes. Also, and this is really important, there's loss of mitochondrial number and function that can lead to apoptosis and reduced cell number with age or with disuse. And then there's reduced size and atrophy. And here we have less of a clear understanding, but I'll talk about this in a moment. There are muscle stem cells that appear to be important in maintaining muscle fiber size that can change with age. And there's a regulatory system which is being investigated, including something called myostatin, which I'll describe in a moment, that changes with age in a way that can affect muscle cell size, muscle fiber size. And really it's really a combination of both as well as other things. So we still have a lot to learn, but you should be aware of these two general categories of changes that can affect muscle size and function, reduce cell number, and reduce fiber size. Here are mitochondria. You all know about mitochondria, where all the oxidative phosphorylation occurs. They're distributed in all cells. So this is a discussion of what they do with muscle. Mitochondria are really fascinating. Little organelles and organisms within all of our cells, and there's a wide range of number of mitochondria, and loss of mitochondria is one of the conditions that I mentioned can affect muscle cell number due to cell death. Of course, this is what ATP is generated. Higher mitochondria content, as I mentioned, is in the type 1 fibers, where there's more dependence on oxidative phosphorylation and burning of fat in particular. again, getting back to the importance of mitochondria. How do mitochondria die? Well, one of the conditions in muscle, as well as other tissues that receive a lot of attention, is the generation of reactive oxygen species, which paradoxically can occur more as one is consuming more oxygen. So this is one of the chronic conditions that we all deal with, is the generation of ROS, which can be important metabolic regulators, but can also be, in particular, in the form of superoxide anions, hydrogen peroxide, a cause of mitochondrial cell loss. Mitochondrial ROS production can increase with age due to changes in the respiratory chain, and mitochondria decrease defense against mitochondrial damage due to free radicals. And this can cause mutations in mitochondrial DNA that can be associated with a lot of changes in aging, including sarcopenia. So here's a scheme, and you don't need to know all the details of this, but just to see where reactive oxygen species fits in terms of disrupting mitochondrial homeostasis, operating through inflammatory signaling pathways, cytokines, NF-kappa beta, can lead to both apoptosis as well as autophagy, which can reduce mitochondrial number and mitochondrial biology. I won't talk so much about that. There's a lot of back and forth in terms of mitochondrial structures that fuse, fission, and that can all be adversely affected by reactive oxygen species. The other side of the equation, and that increases with aging. So on the other side of the equation is mitochondrial biogenesis, which can restore mitochondria. You know about all this. PGC1 alpha is a stimulator of that aging in muscle cells. It's also reduced mitochondrial biogenesis through reduction in PGC1 alpha, that has been shown, and this affects OXPHOS, mitochondrial DNA, and mitochondrial synthesis, as well as there's an anti-inflammatory effect which is lost. So the loss of PGC1 alpha sort of amplifies the loss of mitochondrial function by not replenishing them through biogenesis. And so that's cell number. Now we're about to reduce size. Mechanical stimuli, we said a few times now, is reactivity and neuromuscular signaling. These mechanical stimuli due to physical activity maintain muscle fiber size. Again, with age, that effect is lost in type 2 fibers for reasons that are not clear. So what could they be? Again, this is not telling you anything specific, except that there may be neuropathic changes that lead to less stimulation. There can also be changes in the contractile proteins themselves with age that reduce the size of the muscle fiber. The contractile proteins actin-myosin can be modified post-translationally due to non-enzymatic glycation, like hemoglobin A1. There's excess glucose that can alter the myosin molecule, slowing down the speed of contraction, less activity, leads to a vicious cycle, more atrophy. How does the body try to maintain the size of muscle fibers, and what happens with atrophy? There is, as I mentioned, an important role of muscle-resident stem cells. The stem cells are really revolutionizing all of our understanding of organismal function, and that's true in the muscle as well as other tissues in the body. Muscle-resident cells are called satellite cells. Those stem cells have to regenerate muscle tissue by stimulating growth of muscle fibers and age-related reduction in satellite cell pool size, as well as impaired response to muscle damage that occurs even with just mild exercise. There's always some degree of muscle damage. That requires a replenishment of stimulation of these cells to bring back the muscle mass or prevent its loss. And that changes with age. As been shown in mice, and it's probably true in humans as well. And we don't know exactly why that happens. That's an important area of research, but insulin-like growth factors may be important mechanism for maintaining muscle satellite cells. And again, just another piece of data showing, in this case, the number of stem cells. So here's this little herpetized stem cell. This is a muscle cross-section to a muscle fiber. And here's the herpetized marking the stem cell. And you can quantitate the numbers of these cells through this technique. Type 1 fibers, after exercise, there is an increase in these stem cells, even as soon as 24 to 48 hours. And that occurs in older people as well as young. So again, this is the type 1 muscle, which is doing okay in terms of the response to exercise, in terms of the stem cell replenishment increase, increasing ability to grow. That's what one of the stimuli for muscle growth. The type 2 is a different story. Over the same time period of the same study, the type 2, the stem cells, the type 2 fibers increase nicely in young, but they're really knocked down to start with in older people, and they just don't come up with exercise. So this illustrates, at least to me, very graphically, where a central issue is in trying to reverse this very specific effect of sarcopenia on type 2 muscle fibers, inability to respond to growth stimuli. So system, again, just a little bit of a special topic here, which is under research is one of the ways of perhaps modulating myocyte growth and differentiation is through this protein called myostatin I mentioned earlier. Activation of myostatin actually inhibits muscle growth and differentiation, interacting with the heterodimer in the muscle cell membrane. And so there are studies where blockade myostatin, so reversing the inhibition through that antibody, which is now being used in a lot of conditions now, specifically target molecules, in this case myostatin, has some promise potentially in reducing the chronic inhibitory state of myostatin, so it's releasing inhibition. So that's something that may turn out to have some therapeutic value. But then finally, we talked about this condition as a consequence of aging. It's a consequence of just the balance between factors that stimulate growth and proliferation of muscle versus breakdown. What are the recommendations that are made? And I thought I'd just conclude by mentioning what we've come down to in terms of our clinical recommendations are actually pretty straightforward. They involve diet and physical activity. So, not surprisingly, endurance exercise is recommended. Actually, which should be 30 minutes or 60 minutes or 90 minutes a day, however much time you can devote to it. But, as I discussed earlier on, this will help the type 1 fibers and not necessarily the type 2, but it can certainly help maintain muscle strength and stability, which is one of the important factors that influence the risk of sarcopenia in elderly folks. On the nutrition side, I mentioned distribution of protein. There have been various calculations that have been made about how much required. It's been recommended generally, most recently, is 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram body weight. So it's about 80 or 90 grams for a 70 person. And there are some studies that have used protein supplements with mixed results as to what can increase muscle size, strength, function. And another area of nutrition that I mentioned has been explored is the use of amino acid supplementation. There's a lot of that out there. You don't have to choose your poison. Lots of ways of supplementing the diet. But amino acid supplementation is one that does have some potential merit, particularly when a supplement, leucine in particular, is taken in the neighborhood of exercise, close timing of exercise, and that protein consumption has the ability to utilize the amino acid increases after exercise, so that might be a particularly opportune time to do that. So these are the kind of recommendations that are out there. I want you to take away from this and have some review of what the key points are on Friday, but Just to keep in mind that the kinds of muscle fibers, dog information, the kinds of effects on both number and size of muscle fibers and the changes with aging being selected for type 2 is very tantalizing target that we could find a way of reversing that to really help some of our athletes maintain pro function to their subject. So I will stop there and I'll be around for a couple minutes for questions. I'll share.